Alaska, the last frontier of the United States, where even the government pays you to live there. In fact, in 2015, over 600,000 residents received more than $2,000 for their annual stipend. Sounds nice, right? Well, you couldn't pay me enough to bear witness to the mysterious creatures that some folks have sighted in the Alaskan wilderness. I hope you have a really warm jacket. This episode will give you chills. Enjoy these allegedly true scary stories about horrifying creatures found in Alaska. To have your story narrated, shared with us at darkstories.org. I'd love to hear your scariest workplace experiences, as well as creepy stories from Yosemite National Park. Catch this show and other creepy podcasts at eeriecast.com. Now, let's begin. Alaskan Cryptid Encounter from Christopher Z. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska. Let me start out with I'm an avid hiker and love the outdoors. Me and some friends, Cassie, Ben, and Kiera, were going hiking one day in the summer of 2020. We were up in a place called Crow Pass, a trail that leads from Eagle River to Girdwood, Alaska. It's about a 20-mile hike, and at the pace we were going, we were planning on camping one night and continuing the next day. We began our hike and had a friend set up to pick us up in Girdwood. Upon entering the woodlands, we were greeted by amazing scenery and sunshine. We hiked for about 2 hours, and then we took a break, opening up some snacks, sitting around to relax and eat. A couple of hikers came around and we talked for a while. We learned they were visiting from out of state. Eventually, they ended up leaving us, and bringing up our encounter with the couple will be important later. We started hiking again soon after they left, and we hiked about 8 or so miles. We stopped then to make camp, cooking up some hot dogs and s'mores, talking about stuff in the past. Suddenly, we heard cracking and rustling of sticks and leaves. All of us paused, looking towards the direction the sound had come from. But we couldn't see much. We were dumb enough to dare each other to go closer to the noise to investigate. Cassie was chosen to go and look into the noises further. When she came back, she was white as snow. We asked her what happened and she just stayed silent. Soon after, she sat down and began to cry. We were all super concerned about what was going on. She told us that it was Kiera calling her name and that it was coming from deeper in the woods. But she knew that Kiera was with the rest of us. We were nervous but chalked it up to tiredness. It was a long day, so I said we should all go to bed. We went to sleep, but in the middle of the night I was awakened by a faint scratching noise coming from the side of my tent. I froze and looked over to Cassie. She was fast asleep, and so was everyone else. So I was the only one hearing this. I wanted to wake someone up, but I didn't want to let the thing outside know I was awake and aware. I heard the gravel outside being moved around as the creature, our intruder, circled the tent. I went back to sleep soon after, and was awakened again, this time by Brandon yelling obscenities, wondering why our tent had been slashed. I woke up quickly then, and noticed that the whole flap door of the tent had been ripped. The tent wasn't cheap, and we were all mad. We soon packed up and got ready to leave, when we heard the sound of the couple saying they needed help. We were thrown off guard, and panicked, so we walked into the woods to investigate. Cassie suddenly remembered what had happened the night prior and yelled at us to stop, to just keep going on our journey on the trail. We kept hiking, all paranoid on what was out there, and we stayed silent for most of the way to Girdwood. I noticed a change in the atmosphere and how quiet the surrounding area was most of the day. This didn't seem good at all. I didn't want to scare everyone else there, but I told them we needed to hurry up. About 5 or 6 hours later of moving quickly, we finally made it to the exit. We could hear birds again, and the breeze was again blowing. We were more than happy to talk to the park ranger about the experience, and I could tell he was hiding stuff from us regarding our questions. He seemed happy but panicked at the same time. We've spoken about the hike since then, but we're all still stumped regarding what it might have been. A Wendigo or Skinwalker are our closest guesses. Alaskan Wendigo from Van Oss. I was visiting my brother and his girlfriend, Brad and Mary respectively. They both lived in Alaska, and I lived in Wisconsin at the time, so the best way to get there was by plane. When my flight landed, I went to the front and got my bags. As I got out, I saw Brad and Mary waiting on me. I went over to greet them as we haven't seen each other for a while. Then we all climbed into my brother's truck. On the ride, we talked about how things had been going for us, and how excited I was that I was going to be hanging out with them for a couple of weeks. Soon enough, we made it to their house. I unloaded my bags and went inside. Brad showed me to the room I'd be staying in. After that, we decided to go hunting. Since I'd brought my hunting gear along, I joined them. Grabbing some camping gear, we went to the site that they both were accustomed to. We had to show a park ranger our permission slip, apparently, or some sort of admission form. Then we went to the spot. When we got there, we set up camp, and we each went our separate ways to go hunting. Brad gave me and Mary walkie-talkies to keep in touch with everyone. After splitting up, I was hoping to see a big buck or an elk. They were common here. After a long while of walking and not seeing anything, I climbed a nearby tree to see if I could find a better spot or somewhere to hunker down and wait for my prey to come to me, but nothing really stuck out. I began to climb down the tree, but suddenly I heard this ear-piercing screech. At first, I thought it was an elk, but it sounded wrong, like a cross between a scream from a woman and the call of an elk. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and pressed the button. "Guys, I think I heard an elk." "Nice," Brad said. "Yeah, I think I heard the same call a ways out," said Mary. "Well, I'll go and see what I can spot," I replied. Brad let me know. "All right, we should be getting back at camp later, though." As I ventured to the spot where I thought I'd heard the noise, I found nothing. At first, anyway. But then came a horrible smell. I couldn't make out what it was, but as I searched around, I did discover a dead elk. I'm pretty sure this is the elk I'd heard screaming. It must have been screaming for its life. It was so mangled and rancid, I almost threw up when I saw it. It looked like a bear attacked it at first, but I saw claw marks much bigger than what a bear would do. And when I saw how deep they went, I was beginning to feel freaked out. I started making my way back to camp, and as I walked, I felt as if I was being watched by something. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just getting paranoid. When I made it back to camp, Brad and Mary were there. "So, did you get your elk?" Brad asked. "I found one. It was dead already. If I had to guess, I'd say a bear killed it." "No worries. At least we brought some food along," Mary reminded us. "Hey, by the way, while I was walking back to camp, I felt as if I was being watched. I'm not sure if that means anything, but I thought I'd let you know," I told Brad. Well, this area is known for bears, wolves, and mountain lions. Could be any of those." Brad answered. When he said that, it made my heart jump. But we had a fire going, so we didn't need to worry about them getting too close to the campsite. It was getting late and the sky was turning that beautiful orange. We roasted up some marshmallows, and when we finished eating, we told some scary stories. Before getting too creeped out, though, we moved on to discussing how our lives had been going. As the night wore on, we stopped talking, kinda just sitting there and listening to nature. That's why it was so easy to notice that the critters just went silent. Brad must have noticed I looked concerned. "Bro, what is it?" he asked. I shushed him. The two of them also noticed how quiet it was. As far as I know, when the woods go quiet, it typically means there's a large predator around. Whether that's a bear or mountain lion or something else. After a few minutes of silence, we heard a deep, guttural voice of a man. "Hey, help me. Help me." We were all scared. Brad then called out, Hey, hello? Who's out there? What do you need help with? There was no response. After a moment, we began to hear footsteps going around our campsite. This was followed by some sort of growl. By then we knew that whatever that was, we didn't think it was a person, not a normal person anyway. We grabbed our firearms, and I fired a shot into the air. After that, it was silent again. Soon the footsteps came back. My brother whispered to the two of us, "Let's make a run for it back to the truck." We nodded in agreement. When Brad counted to 3, we all ran for it. While I ran, I could feel that something was chasing us, and it sounded like it was running on hands and feet. We finally got back to the truck. Getting back in, we locked all the doors and windows. When my brother started the truck, the headlights turned on, of course, but they instantly revealed a creature that will haunt us all forever. It was a tall, humanoid thing. Its skin was gray and pale. Its form looked like bone being covered by old skin that didn't fit. Its legs ended in deer hooves, and it had long arms with claws for fingers. Based on how thin and frail it appeared, it looked as if it hadn't eaten in months. But its head is what I'll always remember. It was like a deer skull with antlers on top, and it had a long snout with sharpened teeth that were otherwise human-like, and eyes that glowed red. All 3 of us screamed. My brother got us out of there as fast as he could. When we made it back to the house and ran inside, we locked all the doors, and we stayed up together all night, afraid that thing would follow us. After staying awake for a few hours, nothing else happened. In the morning, we were so scared, we just talked about what happened the previous night. After gathering our courage, we went back to the campsite to get our things, and luckily it was all still there. So we packed it all up, and we never went back again. This happened about a year ago. Brad and Mary still live in Alaska, but they've never seen that thing again. Nowadays, I believe what we encountered may have been a Wendigo. This creature has allegedly been seen in most parts of North America. People have gone missing in the woods, and unfortunately, sometimes only their bones are found by other campers and forest rangers, if any trace of them is found at all. I'm just happy we didn't become the Wendigo's next victims, and for those of you who live or want to go to Alaska, be aware of your surroundings, and never follow the voices that come from the woods, because it could be a Wendigo luring you to its feeding grounds. So camp safely, and take care. Unidentified Alaskan Cryptid, from Spooky Hippie. I lived in a very rural area of central Alaska for 12 years, until I was 13. My sister and I used to adventure a lot. I'm Big Sis. At the time, I was 11 and she was 9. She went everywhere with me. We used to walk a few miles down a power line path to see what we could see. It was like 30 feet wide and a straight line for miles. Well, one day we headed down the path like usual. Daylight, no weird feelings, no eerie quiet, just another day. We get about 300 feet in, and one of the power poles shifts. We stop immediately. We watch it, and it moves again. But it's not actually one of the power poles. It's a tree. It's too far away, about 400 feet or so. My mind is scrambling for an explanation. No Alaskan wildlife is that big. I mean, this thing was as tall as a power pole or a mature tree. The biggest of bears would be dwarfed by it, like a Pomeranian next to a basketball player. I squinted, trying to see if it was indeed a tree man. But all I knew for sure was it looked more like driftwood in a humanoid shape, and it moved all weird, all jerkily. Not in an excessive way. It didn't look demonic. Just a strange gait compared to someone not made of driftwood. Based on stories I would hear in the future, I would now say it could have been a stick man. In my case, there was only one of them, and it was huge, like Siren Head, if you've heard of that. A video in the far future of this event, of Siren Head, is what shook this memory loose. Of course, I'm not saying it was Siren Head. I remember us leaving, quietly and quickly. I don't remember running from it until we got on our property. It wasn't behind us, but if it was, it wasn't pursuing us. I sent my sister the video last week of Siren Head and asked if she remembered something similar. I didn't give any hints. I didn't want to lead her memory to believe anything other than what she remembered. But she remembered it too. Not what it looked like, but that after we got home that day, we planned new places to go explore to avoid that area. And after that, we would start avoiding paths with woods on both sides altogether. We never saw it again, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there, or that the one we saw wasn't just one of many that are nearly impossible to spot due to their thinness and texture. Has anyone else seen something like this? I'd love to hear your stories. I'm not sure if it was something we should even fear. I'm not sure if it was even aware of our presence that day. But I do know that my sister and I were horrified that it might see, hear, or sense us when we were looking at it. I mean, we were scared enough that we never went down that path again. But I don't know if it would have chased us or hurt us. Worst night of my life, from Colton. When I was in elementary school, my father had moved to a different state, and I was in a vulnerable state of mind. I'm now 17, and every time I think about this night, my heart fails to keep a calm pace. My mother and I had just met some family friends for dinner. On our way home from a nice dinner, I had a creepy feeling in the back of my neck. I kept looking behind the car, expecting to see something, but there was always nothing. I brushed it off. Being the quiet type, I said nothing to my mother. As soon as I got home, I felt the worst fear of my life. I went and sat in my room trying to calm down while my mother went to use the bathroom. As I sat there, I heard a voice say to me, "You're not alone." The voice was calming, But as soon as it said that, I knew why I was so tense. The voice was right. I wasn't alone. Somebody, or more accurately, something, was in my house. I grabbed my small hatchet that I owned at the time and went to the bathroom door, shouting, "Mom, someone's in the house!" Immediately, she opened the door and looked me in the eye, then saw the axe. We continued to search the house and found nothing. We called our dinner friends and they came over. One of them believed themselves to be spiritually sensitive, as did I. We went to the basement, and at that point it was 11:30 at night. In the basement I was cold, colder than I've ever been in my life, and I live in Alaska. I'm telling you, I've never been that cold again. I couldn't move, and everybody else was fine. I said to them all, "I can't move." And they looked at me. The sensitive one of them said, "It has you." I just felt panic come over me, and at this point things got fuzzy. The sensitive one sat on the couch and said to me, "Leave this boy alone. Come unto me instead." Still unable to move, I felt a surge of cold in my legs, and I took 2 steps forward. Now understand that I hadn't been able to move myself. I'd been trying up to that point for a long time, and it was now 1:30 a.m. I'd taken the steps and was still cold. I looked to the sensitive one in fear and told them it wasn't me who took those steps. She once again said, "Come unto me, I demand it." I was then flushed with warmth and fell to my knees. She got sick, so sick that she nearly passed out and had a headache so bad she couldn't open her eyes. We went upstairs slowly and sat down on the living room couch. Everything was dark, but the lights were on. I begged them to call our church's pastor, and they refused. By then it was about 2:30 a.m. So instead we called my dad. He didn't answer, so we called my brother who lived with him. In a groggy voice he answered, "Hello?" I start fast. "Get the phone to Dad!" I yelled in a panic, and so he listened. "What's wrong, buddy?" my dad questioned. "I think there's something trying to possess me," I say into the phone. I heard the TV stop and my former stepmother said, "What the heck?" He gets on the phone again and says, "Son, we're gonna pray." I told him that I wanted to as well, so we began a prayer. He prayed that the hand of God would come over our house and provide shelter as well as a legion of angels to come and fend off whatever was there. As soon as he had finished praying, the house lit up to a brightness I'd never seen. Then, hundreds of 3 to 4 foot tall, cloaked, black, shadowy things, screaming and howling, flooded out through the windows, and I just shut down. My dad stayed on the phone for a while longer to calm me and get everyone under control. We all went to bed shortly after, around 4 in the morning, and I'll never forget the terror and cold I felt that night. Abraham and the Bigfoot, from Michelangelo 987. There's a certain acquaintance that I recall talking to last fall. His name was Abraham, but he told me to simply call him Abe. I met him at the bar in my hometown. I was entertaining myself with the bar's TV and drinks as I was waiting for my turn at the billiard table, when Abe sat down next to me. Striving for confidence in just about everything I do, I engaged in conversation with this fellow. After a few minutes, I took an almost instantaneous liking to him and offered to buy him a drink. He turned down the offer, saying, "Young man, you've no need to be wasting your money on an old fella like me." I insisted on it once more, and he responded with,
Well, I don't suppose one drink will be too much of a burden on you. Just one, though. I have no intentions of drying you out of your money. I do thank you kindly, son.
After some time, it was my turn at the billiard table. I won 2 games before it was Abe's turn to play the winner. Now, I'm already pretty good at billiards, but Abe was better than I was at the time. So he was the winner at the table for a while, and I had to wait before we continued our conversation at the bar. We talked for a while, and I discovered that Abe was not only a good billiards player, but he was retired from a long profession in hunting. If you couldn't tell from the way he talked to me, he was an older man. So when he told me this, I correctly assumed that he had seen and done a lot of things. With drinks being consumed, we clumsily slipped onto the topic of the paranormal. During the conversation, he told me about a very impressive Bigfoot encounter. Mind you, I was decently smashed at the time, and if I drink, which is rare, it's going to be something strong. So if someone told me a story that I remember from when I'm good and smashed, it has to be a great story. I remember my twin brother picking me up because I was, once more, too smashed to drive. I woke up the next morning thinking about the story that Abe had told me, although due to my condition at the time, it was a very vague memory. So I made a priority to find him and talk to him when I wasn't messed up. With luck, I found him and asked him if he could tell me the story again. I, with his permission, recorded it on paper. I stumbled across it just recently and decided it would be in better use if it were shared around. What better way to do that than the internet?
Share it with whoever you feel comfortable sharing it with, son, he said to me.
So I'm doing just that. He was a resident of Michigan then, and as far as I know, he still is today. But his encounter took place in Alaska. It happened around the time he was in his late 30s. He explained to me that at the time he was experienced enough to be a professional, but not professional enough to be experienced. It's funny how phrases can really stick to your memory. He didn't specify what time of the season it was, only that it was hunting season. He told me that he was hunting for bear on that specific hunting trip, but he would witness something far more incredible than a simple bear. He started out early that morning. He arrived at the hunting resort by 5 a.m. He walked around for a while before he arrived at a preferred hunting spot and set up. He explained to me that he had learned to be very patient on waiting for animals to show up, if they would show up at all. He also said,
"You gotta be cool with not being able to encounter what you want to see on a hunting trip. Otherwise, it'll ruin the experience that can be gained from making mistakes."
So there he was, waiting patiently for something to show up. After a certain amount of time he didn't specify on, he managed to catch a flicker of movement. He raised his rifle to look through the scope and see what it was. He managed to locate where it was, but he had a hard time identifying it. This is what he had to say about it.
"It was moving so fast, I figured it was running. But the problem with that is every animal has a certain way of running. Whether it be a gallop like a stag or a heavy-footed sprint like a bear. I couldn't detect anything like that with whatever it was, so I assumed it was a person. Then I stopped myself, thought about it, and quickly concluded it was moving fast, too fast to be a person. Being curious in what this thing was, I kept my scoop aimed at it. After a short time of following it, I finally got a good look at him. He walked out into the sun out of the cover of the trees and stopped. What I saw spooked me at first, but then it really impressed me. What got me spooked was just the way it looked. I grew up listening to them Sasquatch stories that old and young people alike would talk about. When I saw it, I knew that's what I saw. He looked like a big man covered in real dark hair, but the hair wasn't dark enough to call it black. He was definitely a male. I didn't see no breasts. I couldn't tell how big he was, but from all them bushes he was hanging around, he looked like he was at least 8 feet tall. But I'd soon discover later that he was bigger than that. His hands were so low that he could almost touch his knees without even bending over. His knees were obviously bent, but they wasn't bent enough to be a big problem for standing. When he was looking around, he didn't turn his head much. It looked like it had to move his hips to do that. The last thing I remember about this thing was just how built he was. It was almost scary just how powerful he looked. What impressed me was the fact that I didn't see him moving until he was almost in front of my naked eye. And at that age, I didn't let nothing past my eyes. So I didn't understand, and still don't understand, how something that big, that bulky, could almost sneak past me. I already had a hard time following it with my scoop, and I don't even think it was trying to hide from me. What also got me was just how fast he moved. Never seen something move so fast and so graceful before or after.
After he was done with that explanation, he proceeded to tell me what happened next as I was eager to listen. He told me after a very short time of it looking around and standing in the same spot, it quickly looked over at him. Abe had something to say about that as well.
I was thinking to myself, how could it have seen me? He's way over there and I'm way over here. I swear I remember the way it looked at me too. He kinda looked at me as if he already knew I was there. Not in a surprise that I didn't know you were there, you know? When I saw the way he was looking at me, I panicked and shot at him. But the way he flinched was like the magazine was full of wood chips.
After he fired the shot and saw the outcome, he got his stuff together as fast as he could and left. Only after a minute of running, he toppled over something big. He didn't see it in front of him because he was paying attention to what could be behind him. He quickly recovered from the fall and turned to see what he had tripped over. He told me that he had fallen over a bear. He pulled out his rifle as quickly as he could, but the bear knocked it out of his hands, the force of the blow knocking him to his back. He said to me he never had to fight a bear in his life, and he was sure he would have been faster if it wasn't for all the weight on his back. He reached for his hunting knife as a last resort, but even with that in his hand, he figured he was going to die. Before the bear could finish him off, an unexpected savior came to his aid. It was a Sasquatch. He explained that the fight between these two behemoths was one that was so intense yet so quick, he didn't even know what exactly ended it, but he did know that the Sasquatch managed to kill the bear. It then looked at Abe. Abe had this to say and nothing more.
When he turned around to look at me, I knew this was the one I'd just shot, 'cause I saw the wound on him. He was shot in the shoulder, so I assumed I must have been more shaken up from looking at him than I thought, 'cause I aimed for the middle of his chest. Even so, I shot him. So why would he come and save me? I didn't even care that he managed to follow me without me even seeing him. So after I saw the way he was looking at me, I knew I was looking at a creature that had such forgiveness that it couldn't be compared with the person. I mean, if you got shot by somebody, would you go and save his or her life right after? I knew I couldn't. But then I studied his face more, and I realized I wasn't looking at a "are you alright" face. I was looking at a "I saved you. You seen what I can do. Now why don't you leave" kind of face. So that's what I did. Remember when I said that I would find out he was bigger than 8 feet tall? Well, he was. He was no doubt in the 10 feet tall range. So when I understood why he was looking at me, I got pretty scared. I grabbed my rifle off the ground and started walking away. When I turned around to look at him one last time, he was already gone, disappeared like a ghost. I could sling you a story that I went back there a few months or even years later and I saw him again, but I ain't no liar. I went back there many times and I haven't seen him. I eventually stopped looking for him. And that's what happened, son.
After he told me the story, I thanked him for sharing and parted ways with him. After that day, I never saw him again. And I often think to myself that this is another one of those stories in the paranormal world that even the biggest of believers would have a hard time believing in. I myself am a bit skeptical of the story, but I will never forget Abe and how a Bigfoot saved his life for a different reason.